Well, okay, it started. So everybody know that we're being recorded. Um, Again, this is the update on the Mountain Valley Pipeline. We wanted to get folks together and talk about what's going on. I'm sure people have a lot of questions, seeing a lot going on. Um, Again, I'll remind you, we are being recorded. It's great if you'll tell us who you are in chat so we know who's here. I mean, we have a list, but it's great to kind of introduce yourself to everybody else too. Um, as we go along, you can ask questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to all those that we can towards the end. And then as we usually do, we'll follow up with an email to everybody who registered. So you'll have links, you'll have information that we're talking about here, and you can yourself follow up and take actions that we're going to talk about. So we wanted to do this specific day on the 23rd. Probably a lot of you know that MVP had asked to give them approval to start in service now. And thank goodness that has not happened yet. But we thought this was a good idea to get people together to share information. Kind of, there's so much going on that it's always good to try to give updates. And then maybe as important as anything is that we wanted to be together to kind of share our mutual, resolve and strengthen each other. That's what's held us together all these years. And we intend to keep that going as much as we can. So we value you, and we hope we can all continue to work together. We know we can. Let's put it that way. And we do want to give you some specific things that you can do now, a little bit further down in the program. Just quickly, I'll tell you who else is here to present, although a couple of them haven't gotten in yet because, again, I think they're having storms or technical problems. But we have Jess Sims from Appalachian Voices, Russell Chisholm from Power, Dr. Crystal Cavalier from Seven Directions of Service is supposed to be here, and she's trying as hard as she can to get the technology working. Mariah Clay from West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and me. So this is kind of the run of show that we're talking about here. We want to start kind of giving you an update on what's happening out there on the ground, the status of activities, talk a little bit about the two regulatory processes that are still ongoing with FERC and PHMSA. So it's there's a lot of moving parts there. And then again, talk about some action items, some things that you can do, or that we all can do going forward to try to affect what's happening. And although we're concentrating on MVP primarily, we did at least want to mention a little bit about the MVP Southgate case and the newer Southeast Supply Enhancement project proposal, so that you have an idea of those, because I know a lot of people are hearing about them and they might not know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Russell Chisholm, and he's going to give us a little bit of an update on what we know about what's happening out there.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sound good.
I wanted to, first of all, thank everyone who's been submitting comments onto the FERC docket, everyone that's been joining the call-in actions that Jess has been setting up every day. I really do feel like we're reaching some key decision makers on this, and we're able to do that really because of information that we receive from landowners, construction observers, advocates, and people all along the route. And that's important because the information coming from these so-called regulatory agencies is very sparse. I would describe it basically as embargoed from the public, and especially from our fence line communities, those of us who live along this monstrosity and are facing the greatest risk from this project if it should ever actually be pumping gas. And so I've selected a few images here for this slide, and so that y'all can see and understand and take this with you after tonight, with the action items that we're going to put out, because these pictures are all from the last 24 hours. So MVP is telling the media, they're telling FERC, they're telling PHMSA, everything's fine, it's all going great. They've been 90-some% done with completion for like 5 years or something. I mean, I've lost track at this point. So where are they now? 99.9999. You know, the reality is this is what people are seeing out there. Some of this construction is related to repairing things that have been found during testing. What they describe as anomalies usually refers to things like dents or ovalities in the pipe, basically defects that are uncovered through what they're supposed to be doing through the consent order. But you can also see the two images on the left. These are over on Poor Mountain section of the route, one of the absolutely steepest, mind-bogglingly terrible locations for any kind of project, much less a 42-inch diameter high pressure methane pipeline. Very, very recent photos of obviously active construction, open trench on that steep slope. The other image where it looks like they've brought in a piece of pipe to replace something that was probably damaged or dented, or some flaw in that pipe was detected during testing. So there is absolutely active work still happening out there. They are nowhere near complete with those sections that you see on your screen. Other landowners have reached out and reported that MVP land agents contacted them with similar types of problems on their property last week, most recently over here in Giles County, which is spread G, where I live. And then in other sections of the route, I'll kick it over to Mariah here in a second to talk about West Virginia. But in Virginia, there's a lot of restoration work remaining. There's bare areas of soil where there hasn't been any grass planted. There hasn't been any remediation of the loose soil that is being replaced along the right of way. And all of these things potentially lead to future problems with things like slips, landslides, sinkholes, the kinds of things that MVP has had problems throughout the entire time of attempting to build this project through our region. I think even today they submitted another variance request for slip remediation up in Wetzel County in West Virginia. And because we watch the docket very closely, we see these things popping up all the time where it's repeat problems. So I just really wanted to give you a sense of, you know, what we're being told from MVP, what we're being told from these agencies does not match what you see on the screen right now. So believe your eyes and ears and the people who live here, because the reality is very different from what's being portrayed. And I'll pause there and throw it over to my amazing friend from West Virginia, Mariah, if you have updates from that side of the mountain.
Thank you, Russell. Yeah, the things that y'all may see in the near future, we are seeing over here in West Virginia. So monitors have observed significant issues with soil instability and slips along MVP. In Monroe County, the slope at Keller's Creek Crossing is experiencing continuous soil movement downhill, which we know poses substantial risks to the integrity of the pipeline and surrounding environment. Complaints have been made and sent to DEP on numerous occasions for this particular site. In an effort to get DEP to reconsider its approval of 2.2 million gallons of hydrostatic testing discharge into potentially karst terrain, we've encountered a couple developments. DEP initially communicated to us that there would be no more hydrostatic testing in West Virginia. so that discharge location would not need to be used. However, an unnamed landowner near Painters Run Road has reported hearing what sounds like could be hydrostatic testing as recently as this morning, but we're also being told it could be air pressure testing. Upon further clarification, it was revealed that MVP indicated no further hydrostatic testing water discharges in West Virginia, but they did not rule out additional testing like air pressure testing. It was also communicated that the additional testing discharge would go to Virginia, but a location was not specified to us. The miscommunication between DEP and MVP emphasizes the concerns we're all having about transparency and accurate information, which MVP has not consistently provided. Most recent compliance reports do seem to be reflecting what monitors are seeing in Northern West Virginia, spreads A and B, although those compliance reports did not include the slip at Keller's Creek, but they did include Lewis County, a slip near Right Fork Freeman's Creek, an ongoing slip on Copley Road in Weston where trees have also fallen, and another slip near Oil Creek Road in Lewis County, and in Harrison County, there's a slip on Newgrass Run Road. And I have coordinates for each of these locations for anyone interested in monitoring efforts. And for overall restoration progress, the percentage for MVP spreads A through F in West Virginia is reported to be approximately 79%. This does seem to reflect the ongoing efforts to stabilize and restore the impacted areas. And we will continue to monitor those areas and report to DEP if we need to. And I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone that signed on to our FERC letter. We received over 2,000 signatures. Wow. Thank you guys. That's my update.
Thanks, Mariah. That was great. And you know, as hard as I try to keep up with this stuff, you guys just taught me things just right there. So I know how valuable it is. So the next portion, if I can get it to change here, we're going to talk about, as I said before, kind of the FERC and PHMSA pictures. In case you don't know, FERC is Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Sometimes we assume people know these things. PHMSA is the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Is that correct? Ridiculous name. But I'm going to turn it over to Jess for the first part of this kind of update on where these agency processes stand.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks so much to everyone that's here this evening. A special thanks, you heard it before, but all of the advocacy everyone is doing to reject this in-service request is working. We're seeing that in real time. So thank you to everyone who is submitting comments, signing petitions, talking to their local government, talking to their state legislators and federal legislators. It is working and we really appreciate it. So just to sort of reiterate what the ask is that Mountain Valley Pipeline put into the FERC docket. On April 22nd, they submitted a request to get permission by today for in-service status with the intention of being operational by June 1st. So this request was put into the FERC docket, but the responsibility of that decision goes to the Office of Energy Projects and a director named Terry Turpin. So as usual, Mountain Valley made an arbitrary timeline that they used to try and signal to investors that they are staying on the timeline they promised them, but it was wholly inappropriate for how far behind they are in terms of, at that point too, construction, testing, and completing the requirements of their safety agreement with PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. So all of y'all that have been putting comments out there and saying, this is a premature request, they are not far enough along to be asking for this in-service status. They admitted that to some degree because about a month later, on May 21st, they acknowledged they are behind schedule. And they made an even bolder demand from FERC staff, saying, when we request our in-service status again, even though we acknowledge we're behind. We're pushing it to early June for operational status. They want FERC staff to respond within 1 day to grant that permission. So they are feeling the pressure from all of y'all and the great advocacy that you're doing. Next slide. So what does this mean in terms of the actual timeline of this decision? We know that although the FERC commissioners, and FERC has 5 commissioners that grant certificates of need, but that this is delegated to the Office of Energy Projects. But the way you can still publicly communicate to that Office of Energy Projects is through the docket. So FERC staff have confirmed that office is seeing everything we put into that public library of information. They were able to say that they do have a standard review process for these types of requests, but they weren't able to say what that standard review process was or to share any public-facing documents that would be helpful to the public to understand what happens next. And that is completely unacceptable. So much like MVP, regulatory agencies, safety agencies, FERC is opaque and they are not providing the information the public needs. They decline to give any sort of indication because they don't want to give the impression that they are answering the question about the request in advance of them announcing it. So very frustrating, but it is very helpful for the calls folks are making to that office to continue to ask about that process. Next slide. So when they submitted their original request on April 22nd, they admitted that the project was not mechanically complete. They admitted that they had a significant amount of restoration to do to be full to complete restoration. And they also had a significant amount of safety testing that was left. They admitted that in some of the spreads, the numbers were either low or actually 0% started for some of the tests. And that information tells the reality of the project. They have miscommunicated and overstated how far along they are to give the illusion that they are on track to investors. And so we know when that letter came in, and as you heard today from Russell, active construction is still underway. So what you see here is a status report that was included in their May 9th filing that shows final restoration at 63.4%. Next slide. By the time they submitted their May 21st letter, it's only gotten up to about 68%. They are still significantly behind. So this is a newer graph that was part of their filing from this week. But most spreads are less than 62% complete. There is so much work left to be done. And so that's one of the things when we're advocating for this is combating the false narrative that MVP has put out there about how far along they are and giving that false sense that the project is almost complete. What is imperative is that the safety agreements they agreed to with PHMSA in the consent agreement are followed. And Dave's going to talk a little bit more about those. And you're muted at the moment.
Sorry about that. It was so wise what I was saying, and you missed it. No, I just wanted to emphasize the idea that they have brushed over all the way along is that they're not done until they get restoration done, because those unstable sites, not only are they environmental hazards, but they're safety factors. So just wanted to emphasize that. So PHMSA, Pipeline Hazardous Safety Administration, formed a consent agreement with MVP October 3rd of last year, requiring a range of activities. Some of those very, very important and useful, certainly not as strong as we would have liked, and not in as much transparency or independent kind of verification, but it did require certain activities. Oops, didn't mean to go. Having a hard time seeing the whole thing because things are in the way here. So there was section 16 of the agreement. Hold on. Having a hard time seeing this. As of now, supposedly 100% of that is done in spread G and 80% in spread H. If I'm getting that wrong, Jess, you tell me, because you understand this better than I. And then section 19A of the agreement, they're way less. And again, they're supposed to be able to finish those things, or they're supposed to finish those things, because it's simply not, we don't have any assurance that it's going to be safe. Of course, we don't anyway, but specifically, if they don't do these tasks, then the harm or the threat is certainly much greater. So a lot of people have seen the news, in large part because a lot of you folks out there helped spread the word. In fact, these photos came from folks there in Bent Mountain, or we probably would have never seen it. But this was an event where they were doing the hydrostatic testing, putting water into sections of the pipe and putting it under pressure, and clearly one of them ruptured. I don't think we still know exactly what happened, and I don't know when or whether we will know exactly what happened. They did say that this pipe was being sent to a metallurgical lab, which I guess is supposed to give some idea as to why it failed. But obviously it's very troubling, because we actually don't even know whether that's happened in other places, to be candid. The fact that people were there, that the mud came pouring onto their creeks and in their land, is part of the reason we know that it happened. And this agreement that they came to, we need to know whether they're living up to it, what parts have been done, what parts have not been done. We don't know the schedules for testing and some of these other things. We don't know what has already been completed. There's certification agreements with the State Corporation Commission, and we don't know exactly what that's about. They're supposed to x-ray all the welds, which of course is many thousands of them. And we should know what those look like. Inspection reports, quarterly reports, all those things that MVP is supposed to complete to give some assurance that things are going to be as safe as it possibly can. They're being hidden. Like people say, this is an opaque process. And the people who depend on the safety the most are the ones who are being kept in the dark. So I'm going to ask folks to chime in on this, but I'm going to start this. As I say, one of the big things we want to do, because there are still things we can do to affect this process. No matter how far along it is, we want to keep working on that and keep insisting on the best performance we can get. So, just the very simplest thing is when you see things on social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever other sources you use, share them. Make sure that it's as widespread as possible. And I'll tell you that some reporters see it on social media sometimes before they get the news in other ways. But just the general huge attention is what helps put pressure on the situation. We've had call-in days, or actually, I think at Voices Power have had call-in days where people, organize and get together on a specific time to let lawmakers or whoever know kind of what we want, what we need them to do. And I'm going to ask you guys to say a little bit about that in a second, but I'm just going to get through the list here. Keep sending things to FERC, put them in that docket, make sure that they're on the public record. Again, it's all pressure, it's all attention that puts pressure on those folks who are supposed to be doing their jobs. The toolkit, which is a great resource with a lot of information, and again, links, places you can go to do activities or to find things. Use that. And again, when we follow up from this session, you'll get that kind of information. You'll get those links. And then finally, and I'm sad that Dr. Crystal Cavalier hasn't been able to make it. She apparently is having really bad storms in her area, and so has had trouble with connectivity for this event. But we did want to emphasize something that she has spearheaded, and that is this tribunal. It's really termed a, let's see, Rights of Nature Tribunal. And it's an international organization that comes in, they hear testimony from experts and folks in the area, and they make judgments on, is this a violation of the rights of nature, and frankly of the people who defend on that nature. So that's going to be a great event. I'm pleased that I'm going to get to go on June 1st. And again, we can give you more information about that. But maybe Russell, Jess, you can chime in, especially on those call-in days, because I think those are so important.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And again, there's a lot of action related materials to share with y'all, and we will definitely follow up with those. I've been dropping links into the chat. I do want to lift up on the registration page for the ASAT Tribunal. There's a ton of resources there, including a petition that you can add your name to help advance the rights of nature laws in the North Carolina General Assembly, if that's where you're calling in from tonight. But please do look through that website and the resources that are shared there. On the call-in days, and as Jess mentioned, all of the comments, the thousands of petition signatures and other things that ways that people have been contributing from wherever they are, we see that the impact that is having. We were hearing nothing from our Virginia senators. We're still hearing nothing from one certain Virginia senator, but Tim Kaine has finally come out and spoken publicly about the concerns that he's hearing from constituents about the safety of this project. Our stance, of course, is that it should never be put into service. It's going to be unsafe. And the primary risk, I think, right now, as they move through this final phase, are things like geohazards. That's why we keep talking about where they are in terms of final restoration completion. When you join those call-in days, which is a kind of a midday lunchtime thing that just facilitates so expertly, it's fun. Honestly, this is not a fun time, but this is a fun way to get together as a group and keep that pressure up, particularly on those federal officials that we're not hearing, like from Mark Warner and others. And then finally, I do want to name it in terms of the final restoration work and some of the other enforcement things that are going on. Virginia DEQ and West Virginia DEP still have a role here. As observers over in West Virginia, as Mariah said, are still reporting things on a daily basis where there are problems. We're likely to see that with a lot of loose soil on these steep slopes, and that'll create slip problems and pollution into our waterways. So we also have an event coming up, which I'll drop in to the chat right now. We're going to pay, let me make sure I have the right link. We're going to pay DEQ a visit and remind them of their role and their responsibility here. These $31,000 fines, these barely a slap on the wrist type of enforcement that is happening on MVP is unacceptable. They need to follow the law. They need to do their job, and we'll keep coming back to remind them of that. However many times we need to do that. Let's see. Yeah. So I'll drop the toolkit link into the chat one more time. Please bookmark that, share that with friends. If you can't make the call-in days, you can set up your own, hopefully, and just get a small group of friends together during business hours and light up those phones in Washington from those officials and state officials too that we're not hearing from. That was a lot of talking. So let me throw it over to Jess and see what you've got to add.
Thanks, Russell. Yeah, everything that Russell said, I'm about to post in the chat the call-in days. We're going to continue doing this tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week, every day at 1. It's a great way to connect with people that are in this fight with you. And they are responding to this advocacy. Some of it we're seeing in real time while we're on the calls, and their staff are giving information we can use to help inform next steps. So really grateful for people who have been joining that. This is certainly something you can do anytime that suits you best. And it's really whatever mode of communication is your preference. Putting something in the docket, sending a tweet, sharing a story, making a call, sending an email, showing up at an event where someone who has some decision-making power in this process gets a chance to hear from you directly. So I would encourage people to share the toolkit with friends that you might think would want to do this work. It is updated every day or so, and we want to make sure to just stay in touch for all of this. Russell has shared the Facebook event page for the event tomorrow, but it's the same Zoom link for each call-in day. So when I get the new page in there, use it at 1 o'clock on Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And please tune in.
Great. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned, Russell, that people like Mariah, you, others are out there in the field still seeing the problems pop up. And, you know, they haven't ceased for 6 years since they started construction, and they're not going to cease anytime soon, as long as they have those bare areas, many of which they try to get reestablished with vegetation over and over, and they fail. So that is an incredibly important part. And I will tell you that we will never stop putting pressure on those agencies. You know, frankly, that's one of my lifelong goals, is to put as much pressure on the Virginia DEQ as possible. And we will continue to do that, you know, forever. So, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Southgate project. Again, we were hoping that Crystal could kind of take the lead on that, because she has been such a powerful advocate in that one, but I'll take a stab at talking a little bit about it. They had the FERC, you know, license, or the FERC certificate quite some time ago. As we know, or you may know, that the state of North Carolina turned them down for a Clean Water Act certification, and the State Air Pollution Control Board in Virginia turned them down for a permit for a compressor station. And in part, they were stymied because it was uncertain whether MVP would ever go forward. Once that horrible, corrupt deal was made in Congress to allow MVP to go forward, then the Southgate project they seem to believe it has new life. We are going to be determined that it does not have new life. But at the same time, we do know that some things have happened. They had to go to FERC and ask for an extension of that original certificate because it was about to run out. And they got that extension from FERC for 3 more years to finish that project. But a number of groups, Wild Virginia and some of the other folks here, have challenged that decision by FERC in court in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. That is ongoing right now. There've been a number of filings recently. One of the things to know about that project is that the current plan that they have outlined, frankly, 10 days after they got that certificate extension, is vastly different from the original plan. It's a shorter route. There are a number of things that are different. So the original FERC certificate and that amendment or that extension make no sense in that regard anyway. Plus, there's all the other reasons that that decision was unsound, because it doesn't protect the environment, because it doesn't make sense energy-wise. But in any case, there's a lot more to fight to go on there, because even as we fight in court against FERC, there will still be new processes with the state agencies in Virginia and North Carolina. There will still be the need for a Corps of Engineers permit. So stay tuned for that. It's a really important case. And then I think Jessica is going to help us a little bit with the Southeast Supply Enhancement Project.
Yeah, so indicative of the overbuilding of infrastructure that we're seeing and sort of this chain reaction of that, Williams Transco, who manages the pipeline that basically serves the East Coast, is now looking to do a massive expansion throughout the Southeast, impacting Virginia and North Carolina with a new 42-inch diameter pipeline that would travel 50 plus miles from Pittsylvania County, Virginia into Rockingham, Guilford, Forsyth, and Davidson, and then have some additional compressor station expansions in those counties and additional North Carolina counties. Their intention is to connect to an intrastate pipeline managed by Duke and Dominion. And so it's this additional spider web of suggested projects that are being proposed even at such a critical time in terms of the climate crisis. And so what is very alarming about Southeast Supply Enhancement Project, or SSEP as we're calling it, is the amount of gas that it would be potentially moving. And so this would make it, in terms of capacity, the biggest on the East Coast, or in the last decade, expansion wise. So communities are actively fighting this. It was sort of pre-applied at the end of last year, coming into this year. It's under FERC review at this time. It's in a scoping comment period right now until June 6th. And that's a time when you can submit comments to FERC staff about what you think they should be looking at during a scoping period, and things that they should be looking at with great detail, like water bodies that don't appear on the maps, like important cultural and historic resources in the community, and other specific environmental concerns for each of those counties. So we encourage you to show solidarity with our North Carolina neighbors and our Pennsylvania, Virginia neighbors who are fighting multiple pipelines at this time. You can visit nossep.org for events, talking points, and information on how to submit a scoping comment into the docket. And I'll say many thanks to 7 Directions of Service, who have been leading a lot of that work and getting out in the community with canvassing. Thank you also to Sierra Club for the work going on that fight that is in an early stage, but an organized stage.
Thanks, Jess. And again, all the work that people have been doing showing the horrible damage that MVP has done feeds into the same questions about the Southgate and about the Southeast Supply Enhancement Project, because they're going to cause some of the same problems, no matter what. It doesn't matter whether it's MVP or Transco or whoever they are, they're willing to run roughshod over us, over our environment. And as we gather the information and document it, that will continue to be a factor going forward. So now we're going to kind of try to work through some of your questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see these lovely faces a little bit better. And I'm just going to start kind of scanning through. I didn't see anything specifically in the Q&A box, but I'm going to look one more time. I did see one question in the comments that was why are they doing air pressure testing versus water pressure testing? The fact is they're supposed to do water pressure testing on every segment. So, you know, whether they have done that or not, where that stands, again, we get reports on supposedly how much is done, but that is the requirement. Now, there's another thing with the pig that they run through these things, and I'll be honest, I have no idea how that's supposed to work, but I think that's a way to inspect the interior of the pipes. If any of you guys understand it better than I, feel free to say.
Yeah, I would just add that on those pig runs, that is where they're trying to detect anomalies in the pipe. So they run the pig through and it will find things like ovalities, it'll find dents. Some of this pipe's been sitting out in the elements for so long. We've documented sections that were obviously rusty, and potentially some of that rust may flake off, and those will be detected by those pig runs. I'm also not an expert in that, but this is how it's kind of been explained to us when we have been able to get some communication going with representatives from PHMSA and others who have looked at what types of tests that they're running. I would just say that, again, as folks are thinking about, weighing in on the FERC docket, reaching out to these agencies, joining the call-in days, the lack of transparency around what those tests are revealing, or why they're running the air test in that one section versus water testing, that's just information we don't have. We're constantly blocked out from getting answers about what's happening there. So we keep digging and we keep pushing. And no matter what happens between now and early June or mid-June with this decision from FERC, we're going to need to keep asking for that, because before they start shipping gas through our communities, if they ever start shipping gas through our communities, we deserve to have a full accounting of how they determined this project to be safe in their estimation, because we don't believe it can be, and we'll, going to need all the help that we can get from everybody on here to keep making that ask.
Yeah. And, again, the thing that happened with PHMSA, them coming out and saying there are problems, that reflected what you all have been telling them for years. They may want you to believe that they were going to do that anyway, but that's highly doubtful that they would have taken that step if it hadn't been for the pressure. So you just can't underestimate. I know it's frustrating. I know it as well as anybody, because I've been dealing with these agencies for many years. And it feels like you're hitting your head against a brick wall sometimes, but it does make a difference and will continue to make a difference. I'm scanning through the chat and trying to see if there were any other questions. Please feel free to stick more in there or in Q&A if you have them. I'll say that I'm just enjoying seeing all the friends out there, the heroes. Saw Grace Terry there. I think you're the hero who got the photo of the pipe, if I'm not mistaken. Just so many of you who have just been so resolute. So I'll just say again, it's a horrible thing to have to be part of, but it's a joy to be part of it with all you folks. Russell.
Thanks, David. I think it moves it over into the answered category. I just wanted to recognize Katie's great question about efforts to target the funders of this project. Again, no matter the outcome here on MVP is disastrous for climate. It is all fully supported by these banks, these investment firms who, when we are looking at the work we're going to try to do together around Southgate project and SSP, the banks are a big piece of this. So I dropped some links into the answer there that will also go out in the follow-up materials to some recent actions that we've taken to keep calling out the banks on this. an action network alert targeting Vanguard, who's a big backer of Equitrans midstream, big backer of EQT. And remember all of the people upstream from these projects too. Recent news coverage of people whose water has been poisoned, making their homes unlivable, living near these drill sites. This is all the same bad actors. And then finally, a great Instagram post from our colleague Dan over here at Power that ties it all together and where the banks come into this. So that's another great action that people can start following and getting involved in.
Great. And again, I'm kind of scanning if there are any other questions that people have. We a couple more minutes here. I will remind you again, we always follow up these events with an email that gives you information. So you're not feeling like you're just hearing this onslaught, which you are, but that you have to remember it all because we're going to help you figure out what you need to know going forward. And just remember that your piece, whatever that happens to be, matters, and we value it. So, anybody else see questions? Bill Kitchens, hand up. Can you type your question in the Q&A or into the chat, Bill, if you have another question? I will say that, obviously you guys know where to find us. And if you have other questions, that's what we do, all of us. We do that day after day. Oh, I see a new one, Lib Hutchie. Silly question. Didn't your teacher tell you there are no silly questions? Is there a live pig running through the pipes? Not that we know of. That's not what we're referring to. It's a mechanical thing. Um, you know, who knows what these crazy people will do? But no, I'm pretty certain there are no live animals in there, or there shouldn't be. Um, okay, I see your note, Bill. You'll send something by email. That's great. Appreciate that. Okay.
There's a question about Mark Warner.
Oh, okay.
If you scroll up a little bit
In Q&A or chat?
in the chat.
Okay, let me find. Okay, you mentioned that Mark Warner has not responded. Is there any information about why? Is he connected to financing or in any other way? Well, I'll just give you an opinion. It's hard to say things definitively, but I'll be honest, he's never been as willing to speak on these issues as even Senator Kaine. And of course, we're not always convinced that Senator Kaine is being as forceful as he could be or should be. Um, it's just simple that, they don't want to ruffle feathers. We'll remind you that I'm pretty sure that Tim Kaine is up for election, which might make him more susceptible to pressure. Mark Warner, I don't think is going to come around for several more years. So that might be a factor. But anyway, that won't stop us from telling him what he needs to do.
Yeah, I want to lift up again that what everybody is doing is working. So we've shifted from a week ago, Representative Griffith had not spoken out, Senator Kaine had not spoken out, and y'all have been contacting them. You are moving them further along, hopefully to get to an even more helpful place, which would be submitting a letter to FERC, contacting the Office of Energy Projects, communicating with PHMSA. But my hope is that Senator Warner will be inspired by the words of his colleagues and follow suit. And that's certainly something you can thank Representative Griffith and Senator Kaine for saying, but there is always more that they can do to advocate for the safety of their constituents.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions right now. again, you're going to get more information, probably more than you want, but it's useful information. And feel free to ask us questions. Russell, you had something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to let folks know again, the toolkit is in the chat there. We'll share these things out so we can keep pressuring all of these representatives. And we're not overlooking West Virginia folks here too. It's tough to reach them, but we thought the same thing about, somebody like Morgan Griffith. So, in solidarity with everyone all along 303 miles of this route, whoever you're moved to call in the coming days, whoever you're moved to email and pressure, just keep doing it. Those representatives in West Virginia should care about the pipe safety issue as much as anybody else that so far we've been able to reach. That is a big question that remains, and it doesn't have to come down to whether they're in favor of pipelines and want to build pipelines on everybody's farm or not. If the safety of our West Virginia neighbors is important to you, please uplift the messaging that is targeting those folks there too.
Absolutely. And, they don't have to say they're an environmentalist. They don't have to say they care about any of those factors. What they're supposed to care about is those people who are in their districts, in their states, who they represent. And I think we can all remind them that the destruction and the harm will be on their heads in part if they don't speak up, if they don't do their part. They need to keep that in mind. So let me see what else we got here. We keep going back and forth. Equitrans is having a hearing in Pennsylvania, June 12th through 14th. If somebody has information they want to share about that, let the group know if it's something that we can do something about. Okay. Well, I guess we can call that a night. We can go and do something more to give MPB a hard time now. And we'll let you go. But thanks everybody for being here. We really, really value it. And thanks to all my colleagues who know so much and teach me every time a little bit of something. So thank you very much. Take care.